We've all had that teacher we thought was cute or good looking going through school. Usually it's just a quick Miss Jones is hot or Mr. Davis is so gorgeous. But what happens when someone crosses the line? What happens when the person who crosses the line is the adult that's meant to protect you? The case we discussed today is one of the first high-profile cases that involved an inappropriate sexual relationship between teacher and student. And this relationship turned deadly. This is a brief history of Pamela Smart. As always, this episode of A Brief History contains graphic content and may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Pamela Smart was born on August 16, 1967, in Windham, New Hampshire to John and Linda Wojcik. When Pamela was a child, the family moved back to Miami, Florida, where she was raised until she entered the 8th grade, and then they moved back to New Hampshire. By all accounts, Pamela was smart, attractive, and confident, eventually becoming a cheerleader at Pinkerton Academy in Derry, New Hampshire. After finishing high school, Smart went back to Florida to attend Florida State University to receive a degree in communications. Gregory Smart was born on September 4, 1965 in Nashua, New Hampshire to parents William and Judith Smart. Gregory seemed like a well-adjusted and focused child, eventually graduating from Londonderry High School in 1983 and then attended the Metropolitan Career Success School in Warwick, Rhode Island. In 1986, during a visit back to New Hampshire for Christmas, Pamela and Gregory met at a New Year's Eve party and instantly seemed to hit it off. After break was over, Pam returned to Florida to continue university, but the couple remained in touch and began a serious relationship in February of the following year. 2 years later, in 1989, the couple married and Gregory moved down to Florida to be with his new wife during her final year of university. After Pamela graduated, the couple moved back to New Hampshire to be closer to both of their families and also so Gregory could get a job as an insurance agent with his father. Pamela eventually got a job with the Hampton School District and began volunteering at Winnicott High School in Hampton, New Hampshire. The couple seemed to be living in bliss for at least a little while. Despite Pamela claiming at one point that her life with her husband was, quote, picture perfect, the relationship between Greg and Pam broke down just months after their nuptials. Pam was a self-proclaimed typical Leo and stated she knew she needed to be the center of attention everywhere she went. After purchasing a condo together in Derry, New Hampshire, Greg started to want different things for his life. He wasn't as dedicated to the heavy metal music scene that the couple had bonded over. He wanted to start a family. The problems became so bad that Greg had an affair with a woman while out on a business trip. Greg couldn't keep a secret and confessed the affair to Pam, who used the knowledge of his betrayal as cannon fodder anytime they got into an argument. Pam claimed that the affair severely deteriorated her trust in her husband and she wanted to leave the marriage. During this time, Pam was hired as the Media Services Director with the school board in Hampton, New Hampshire, and volunteered at Winnicott High School for Project Self-Esteem, a local drug awareness program. Pam quickly became a well-loved volunteer. Instead of the kids feeling detached from her, it seemed like Pam understood them and even shared interests with them, like music. She would frequently relive her glory days with the teens in the program, telling them about her backstage passes for heavy metal concerts. One of the teens involved with the program was 15-year-old Billy Flynn, who went out of his way to be around and assist Pam with the program. It's also said that Billy visited her office daily. Pam also became entangled with her young female intern, Cecilia Pierce. Despite the age gap of Cecilia's 15 to Pam's 22, and knowing that it was overstepping boundaries, the pair became fast friends and Pam confided much of her unhappy life to the girl. Pam began to manage a video project with a few of the local teens, Cecilia and Billy included, and she began hanging out with the group of teenagers almost exclusively. She would join them at the mall, arcades, clubs, and even invited them back to her condo to work on their video project. Greg, at the same time, was also spending more time with his friends, but Greg's friends were adults. In February of 1990, in her office at Winnicott High School, Pamela and Billy Flynn were hanging out when she asked him, "Do you ever think about me when I'm not around?" The teen replied, "Sure." To which Pamela replied, "Well, I think about you all the time." The relationship instantly changed, and the time Pamela spent grooming her young beau seemed well spent. Billy was ecstatic, thinking that he was the luckiest kid in school for landing such a beautiful and fun older woman. Just a few weeks later, Pamela kissed Billy for the first time. Then a month later, while Greg was out of town on business, Pamela invited both Billy and Cecilia over to her condo for a movie night. This would be the first time that Pamela and Billy had sex, but would not be the last. Pamela and Billy met up at various places and times to have sex, and she began to become more and more frustrated at her situation. Pamela didn't want to be with Greg anymore, she wanted to be with Billy, but was concerned that if she divorced Greg, she would lose everything from her condo to her furniture to her dog. Pamela began putting ideas into Billy's head, stating, "You have to get rid of Greg," and even falsely accusing Greg of beating her and telling Billy that the only way out would be to kill him. Billy didn't seem to take Pamela's suggestions seriously until one day, Pamela clearly stated, "If you want to keep seeing me, you'll have to get rid of my husband." It was at this moment that Billy realized Pam was serious about getting rid of her husband, and because of years of grooming and sexual abuse at the hands of this older woman he believed himself to be in love with, Billy knew the only way to keep her would be to do as she asked, and remove Greg Smart from the equation. Billy Flynn gathered 3 of his friends, including Pete Randall, and they concocted what they believed to be a foolproof plan to get rid of Greg Smart. Pam would leave the door to the cellar of their condo open, where the boys would enter and ransack the house, making it look like a burglary gone wrong. They were not to turn on any lights, they weren't to hurt the dog, and they were supposed to use a gun, because Pamela didn't want blood all over her white leather couch. They finished off the plan by telling Pam to just act natural when it finally came time for her to discover the body. Around 8:30 p.m. on May 1st, 1990, Billy Flynn and Pete Randall entered the condo to retrieve the dog before Greg could arrive home. It took them a few minutes to catch the dog, who was noticeably scared, and the boys later claimed that they threw the dog down the basement stairs to get it out of their way. After removing the dog, the pair ransacked the house and began taking jewelry and small electronics to make the robbery seem plausible. After destroying the home, the boys waited for Greg to arrive and quickly overpowered him as he walked through the front door of the condo. Greg, in an attempt to save his life, tried to hand his wallet over to the teens, but Pete Randall instead told Greg to give up his wedding band. Greg shouted, "No, I can't do that. My wife would kill me." These would be Greg's last known words. Just moments later, Billy Flynn aimed a revolver at Greg's head and pulled the trigger. The 2 boys escaped with their other friends who had been waiting as getaway drivers. Pamela Smart arrived home to find her husband's body lying on the floor at the entrance of their condo. Pamela called authorities, and looking at the condo, it was initially speculated that it was simply a burglary gone wrong. But Pam's behaviors were increasingly suspicious for what should have been a grieving widow, and as they continued to investigate, the evidence just didn't add up. There were no signs of forced entry, there was no sign of a struggle, and the execution-style murder just didn't align with a simple break-in. Pam, on the other hand, was the picture of composure, and insisted on an immediate interview with the police despite just having found her husband's dead body. Detective Daniel Pelletier was in charge of the investigation, and his warning flags about Pamela kept going off. From her misplaced concern about her dog Halen, to stating that the first thing she noticed when she entered the house, rather than her husband's body, was the fact that the speakers were missing from the television stand. Finally, the detective brought Pamela back to the house to collect some of her things, and he witnessed her walking directly through the blood stain on the carpet multiple times. Not something you would expect from a grieving widow. Soon after, police received an anonymous tip that teen Cecilia Pierce had been aware of the murder plot, and Cecilia quickly broke her silence and agreed to wear a wire, hoping that Pamela would slip up in conversation and expose herself. Detectives were right, and Pamela quickly spoke too much about the murder while Cecilia is wearing a wire, and she was caught. On August 1st, 1990, Detective Pelletier visited Pam's office at Winnicott High School, where he said, "I have some good news, and I have some bad news. The good news is that we've solved the murder of your husband. The bad news is you're under arrest." Pamela Smart and the 4 boys involved in the murder were all arrested and charged with various murder charges. The 4 boys quickly secured plea bargains in exchange for offering testimony during Pamela Smart's trial. The trial was a media sensation, claiming that a beautiful young woman had seduced her young teen student, resulting in him murdering her husband so they could be together forever. But the prosecution decided instead to tell the other side of the story. A young adult woman who was a mastermind, who groomed, sexually abused, and manipulated her young student into murdering her husband. Despite Pamela denying throughout the trial and still to this day that she had no knowledge of the murder plot carried out by Billy Flynn and his 3 friends, Pamela was convicted of accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and witness tampering. Pamela Smart received a life sentence without the possibility for parole. Billy Flynn and Pete Randall each received 40 years while the other 2 received 30. Pamela Smart is still serving her sentence to this day at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in Westchester County, New York. Pamela's mother, Linda, still to this day fights for her daughter's freedom and firmly believes in her child's innocence in the murder. Since her incarceration, Pamela Smart has tried to fight for her freedom multiple times, through appeals and asking for her sentence to be commuted, but she has been denied at every turn. In a recent interview, Pamela stated, "What happened to Greg is the most horrible thing I've ever gone through in my life, and I'm still haunted every day by memories of what must have happened to him inside our house before he was killed. Although I wasn't there, I feel that because of that, I'll never know how Greg was feeling at the time. I keep thinking of how afraid he must have been and how senseless this whole tragedy was. A lot of the times, I still can't even believe he's gone." What do you think? Has Pamela convinced herself that she actually had no involvement in the murder, believing her innocence through a trauma block? Or is she a mastermind manipulator who knows exactly what she's done but refuses to admit her guilt? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching another episode of A Brief History. Thank you to my patrons who support this series. You are so much appreciated. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime Sims content every Friday or Saturday. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.